without further ado, I'm going to welcome John and his panellists to the stage. Please put your hands together.
Just sit there if you like. Right, okay, well, we're going to continue our look at measurement in this new era of media, and we have some brilliant people to help us through that. And I'm just going to ask each panellist to introduce themselves in turn and also answer our first question, which is what proxy measure do we need to ditch? Just put it into the history books now, for whatever reasons. So if you can just introduce yourselves, tell us, a little bit about your company, and then answer the question. So Alison, we may as well start with you, as you're right next to me.
Hi everyone, I'm EEBT, and I look after all of our AdTech, MarTech within media. I also represent, so I'm called Media Acceleration, but what we look after is AdTech, MarTech, first-party data, how we use it, where we use it, our measurement, which is why I'm here, that includes brand safety, and creative in terms of dynamic, where you use it, how you use it. And underneath all of that is ethics and data privacy, because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I'm here today because I've just been, I wanted to be, so thank you very much. Okay.
Is there a proxy that
Oh,
you
yes. If any of you, because I had to think about this, because I was like, no, I'd keep everything I've got at the moment. But actually, if any brands out there are knowingly using fingerprinting, you need to get rid of those measures because they're wrong and they're going away. If you don't know you're using them, ask your agency.
Okay.
Ooh, that's spicy. Okay.
Maybe we'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
So Cecilia.
Yes, hello. Hi, my name is Cecilia Donas. I'm the former head of advanced analytics and data sciences at L'Oreal, focused on marketing and advertising applications, former head of data for MOA Tennessee. I'm currently at Columbia Business School within the marketing department. And the measure that I would get rid of, I still run into this one, impressions. That's just a validation you spent something.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Thiago.
Yeah, I'm Thiago. I am Chief Digital Officer at Zenith, I look after the digital activation strategy for all of our clients, but also think about how to bring together the different digital capabilities across Publicis Group to make sure that we're delivering solutions for our clients. I'd get rid of last click attribution, especially having grown up as a performance marketer. It has been the bane of my life for a long time. I just don't think it really represents what we think it represents.
Okay, great. And Marc?
This is the curse of going last.
Yeah.
It's mine. I'm Marc Guldimann. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Adelaide. We're the leading attention metrics vendor. We've been doing this for almost a decade. We've had a whole journey through going from viewability to using duration-based metrics, and now moving beyond duration just to probability, which I'm looking forward to unpacking. And since the last click was taken, I'll go with duration-based attention metrics. And even though we're still moving from viewability to attention, it's a really, really bad idea to judge the quality of media based on how long people look at ads. The duration of gaze is largely about creative and about audience. Media creates an opportunity for attention, and so I'd like to go right from viewability past duration-based metrics all the way to the probability of attention.
So viewability is what you would ditch?
Well, I would ditch duration-based attention metrics.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay. Okay, great. Okay, well, one of the other bullet points that we need to start with from the agenda is what will change post-ad signal loss. And Alison, just come to you again first, simply because I know that you've run exercises on this.
All right. Okay.
So tell us, what impact do you think there is?
So, first of all, from a brand's point of view, you've got to think, would it affect your share price? Will it affect my share price, right? Will my financial and commercial people be adversely affected on a Monday morning when they come in and their trading dashboards have collapsed? And the answer is no, they won't. So we ran an exercise, and I called it cold water shock, where we literally produced a set of reports through, and we just tracked it through to who was going to feel it and who wasn't, okay? And actually, it's localized to this world here, but the companies and the brands will survive and adapt. And I'd quite like it gone now, to be honest, so we can just get on with it. But at a local level, so media reports, yes, they will change, but we are already running everything in parallel, because I want everybody to just adjust, and even though they don't have to rely on certain numbers now, they will going forward, and they will on new measures. So we run them side by side, and you can get used to it, because yes, your last click it isn't going away, because PPC, etc. It isn't going away, but it's the combination of everything will move forward.
Okay, so no apocalypse that we've been promised?
On the share price? No.
No, the share price, good. Okay, does anyone else have anything to add to that before we move on to other matters? Okay, because I know, Alison, again, I will come to everybody else, don't worry. You are a big fan of econometrics.
Yes.
Okay, and in terms of moving towards outcomes measurements, I mean, is that basically the ultimate answer?
So we're a big brand, and honestly, it's been so hard to get everybody to buy into econometrics. You have to have a really good commercial relationships. You have to have trust, and that means you actually have strict governance about who runs econometrics, who marks the homework, put it somewhere neutral so that it doesn't have, you don't have your media agency. Even if they're doing the best job ever with their econometrics, nobody's going to believe them because it's in their interests. So run it somewhere neutral, make sure that the models you're using are robust, you've got all the channels in there, automate your API, get your API feeds running so that you're not running around looking for brand insights, get everything ready and start building up, because you do need 3 years of back data, and as a big brand you can do that. Smaller brands will struggle more, but they can still do it. So yeah, a big fan of econometrics, purely because of its neutrality, and it can adapt to the future, and you can get more reads faster.
Okay, you mentioned automation. Is there anything else that you need from econometrics to make it work better for you?
No, ask me in 6 months. Yeah.
Great, okay. Cecilia?
Just to build on that, I think in terms of adoption of econometrics within organizations, there needs to be a partnership within the marketing organization and the financial organization. So once you have those two parties working together, utilizing the same language, econometrics is more easily adopted, I would argue. And additionally, it's not a magic wand type of measurement solution, meaning you can't throw everything at it and still and get all of the outcomes you're meaning to measure. Every organization should always have some form of a research agenda, learning agenda, experimentation. The fun thing about being in media land and digital land is that we can experiment. So we should always be doing that as well, in addition to the higher level econometric modeling to help guide strategic decisions.
And do you think that media departments are equipped today to go into a boardroom and talk, at the sort of level they expect you to hear in terms of outcomes?
Maybe his organization can. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm a little bit biased. I'm a statistician, so the maths part doesn't bother me. But I find the accessibility of the core concepts to be a challenge for some brands and advertisers. It's highly dependent on the level of maturity, the discipline within the practice, who are the actual individuals involved, and the level of experience within the media ecosystem, which would determine how easy or how difficult the conversation can be.
Okay, we're just going to come to some proxies in a while, but just, I know you mentioned cognition before as a kind of a measurement that we should all focus on. Like, does the consumer get what we say? I mean, where does that fit in? Is that a proxy? How do we where does that fit into a sort of measurement ecosystem?
So how to operationalize cognition, understanding traditional methods. I am still a big fan of qualitative methods. I know you can't say that in a quantitative audience. You can. Focus groups still matter, surveys still matter. The ability to actually interpret what your consumer is saying to you in forums, public forums, still matters. And so I'd argue that listening to the words they use to talk about your brands has some implication on whether or not they fully understand what you're trying to communicate.
Okay, and Thiago, when we talk about the measurement techniques that will be sustainable in the long run, in this sort of new era where there's more focus on privacy, for example, and I'm not talking about green sustainability, it's about just things surviving, what do you think we need to focus on?
Yeah, so I think really you need to look at resilient signals. So we need to look at signals that are ultimately just not at risk of deprecation. So it will be things like impressions, unfortunately, but it will be things like in-platform metrics that you can actually track, investment. Essentially, it is going back to regression-based techniques. And I think Alison makes a good point that as media agencies, our role is quite complex in this. And I think we do need to help clients transition, especially in a performance space where they're used to using attribution that perhaps wasn't quite giving them the read that they should have had, certainly not something that would translate in the boardroom. And there are sales teams that you need to take on that journey. So the way that we're working with clients at the moment in making that transition is first and foremost that we're really happy about it. I think it takes us to a better place where we get closer to the actual business outcomes we're trying to deliver. But also is to really, I guess, bring the capability to client teams, but essentially to help equip them to run their own modeling capability. And really our role is just to accelerate them on that journey, but ultimately to hand over those models, ensure that this is something that they have total ownership of. Because I think to Alison's point, it's really like that is the part that we can play. But I think it is about using regression-based techniques to start connecting the outcomes that we ultimately care about to the metrics that we know are not at risk. And I think another point that you made, Alison, that was really, really resonant actually, is around also the things that we can do and the things that we should do. And I think there is a point to taking metrics that are going to be sustainable also from an ethical perspective, in that these are metrics that are never really going to run us into trouble in terms of the minds of consumers.
Okay, and I've heard you talking about small data and using that more, so moving from big data to small data. I mean, just explain that and how that fits.
Yeah, so I think, like Cecilia mentioned, to be honest, so the idea is just that we should take qualitative research. I think the stuff that Adelaide do also is taking that approach of like, actually, how can we transpose small data sets and use statistical methods to actually embed them in the way that we're planning media at a large scale. And I think we've really been a little bit overexcited about the possibilities of big data as an industry over the last few years. But we are being forced into a place which I think ultimately will be better for us as an industry, where we are looking at the power of small data and how we can start to integrate that into the way that we do things. Ultimately, I think it means leaning into complexity a little bit, and with all of these different techniques, I think, you know, a useful shorthand that we kind of use internally is all models are wrong, some are useful. And it's about connecting those different lenses so that you understand where the sort of consistencies exist and you can explore the spaces where there is a bit of a divergence.
Okay, so we'll talk about alternative measurement solutions now. And we'll start, I don't know if it's an alternative measurement, but certainly a new one that's come in on the block, which is attention. So Marc, your company have an attention measurement solution. So first of all, just talk us through that. Tell us about it, how it works.
Yeah, so we've been, like I said, we've been doing this for almost a decade. We previously, me and my co-founders ran an ad network called Parsec, where we sold media on a cost per second. I think like the idea of attention being measured in the duration of attention is sort of common sense, and it's what everybody tries to do first, and that's what we did. It worked really well, but what we found was when we really wanted to optimize those campaigns to drive the maximum amount of attention, we ended up creating some really weird audience biases, right? It turns out, and Facebook just released some research that backs this up, old people pay almost twice as much attention, or they look like they're paying twice as long attention to ads versus young people. So guess what? When you optimize towards the impressions that capture the most attention, you just target old people. Also, drunk people take 30% longer to read than sober people. People that know about your brand pay more attention to your ads than people that don't know about your brand. And the creative, I missed Soren's presentation earlier, but like at a very base level, the creative that captures the most attention isn't necessarily the creative that's doing the most work. So you do, like what we found at Parsec was that you really don't want to measure the quality of media based on how much attention it gets. We think that media's job is to create an opportunity for attention that's capitalized on by the creative and is relevant to the audience. So if it's an opportunity, it's a probability. And so we think that you should measure the quality of media based on the probability of attention by any person to any creative in a placement. So it's just basically a placement score. And it's driving back home to media quality, which is so important because as you lose those signals, like I almost think that the fixation on attribution is an artifact of broken currencies. And like, if you don't know the quality of the thing you're buying, you get really, really concerned with what it got you. But when you know what you're buying, you have a little bit more faith in the quality of that thing. So hopefully the rise of attention metrics will help mitigate some of the loss of signals around attribution, identity, and connecting exposure to outcome.
Okay, so what's the impact where it's been used? Because I know you've got customers using it, agencies and media owners.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens when it's introduced?
Yeah, so I think it's this really cool thing because the best currencies are made via arbitrage, right? And so there's two ways you can make a currency. You can make it via fiat, which is just a bunch of old dudes in a room who are like, 50% for 1 second sounds about right, and it gets gamed right away. Or you can make it through market-driven arbitrage, which is the buy side has data that the sell side doesn't have. They use it to bid up underpriced, high-quality assets and bid down overpriced, low-quality assets until at some point price starts to approach value, and that's the alpha gets compressed, and then the buyers go to the sellers and say, hey, will you guarantee me the media that I'm buying using this new metric instead of the old metric? And that's a market-driven way to get to currencies. It creates a much more stable and currency with much more longevity. And it also creates much better incentives in the market, right? We've seen what viewability has done to the web. It's not a good thing. Someone had a really great quote up here earlier that said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different outcomes. We do not need a standard for attention. We do not need the IAB to tell us how to define attention. We want the market to drive the next currencies, and we want to have the best currencies that are the best reflection of quality and eventual outcomes win.
Does it result in more efficient media buying, reduced waste?
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a business. Like the number one thing that we tell our clients, like the first thing they have to do is A/B test. Like test the cost of incremental outcomes when you're using our metric, which is called the AU, versus viewability or duration-based attention metrics or whatever you have. You have to test that, and you have to look for incrementality, because otherwise attention becomes just this novelty thing. Like, oh, I did my attention campaign, check it off, and now I'm done. Like we really want it to become the next currency to replace viewability, and that requires the rigor of doing A/B tests and understanding incrementality.
Okay, Cecilia, what do you think of attention as a measurement metric?
Theoretically, totally aligned. Operationally, I think there are some challenges and opportunities. So what has been demonstrated in the literature is that in terms of information processing, we process sounds faster than we process visual. And so when we think about grading quality of content, for example, do we actually look at those components separately? Do we actually consider them? I would argue many brands may not. I'm not sure how many agencies do. I also think that when we think about media, where I get really excited, and I almost want to talk to your head of product, is what I see coming in the future is a lot of biometric data. I understand I'm in the UK at the moment, and there are all sorts of concerns around that data, but at least in the US, for now, biometric data, so when you have wearables, your haptic watch or any other kind of wearable, it's emitting digital signals of the consumer. So pupil dilation, heartbeat, that kind of thing. That will start to become a signal in the marketplace of whether or not you are paying attention. So how long your eyes are focused on a particular, how your pupils dilate, whether or not your heart beats faster. That will be additional signals of attention that will be very exciting in the future marketplace. How it plays out globally, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. But I think operationalizing attention over time as we get more and more digital signals will be such a fun and fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
So Alison, you must be bombarded daily with new ideas for measurement, not just attention, but there's all these sort of alternative measurement solutions that have come out of the US because people got fed up with Nielsen, and they can offer you sort of guarantees of incremental reach, these kind of things. I mean, what do you think of that sort of that expansion of measurement options generally?
Okay. Viewability has been dead in the water for a long time, and I was programmatic by background and I hated viewability, okay, because it says one thing, but your results say something else. Attention, we've been a fan of for years, but trying to get it to where its role is and where it balances, because you don't want to make a commercial decision, but you want it as a guide for a lot of things. And so its role, I don't think, is fully established yet, but it's really interesting. And your biometric scares the hell out of me, right? but my son wouldn't care; he'd think it's great. So that's all good. Yes, we do get bombarded, and the thing that the guys that are bombarding brands have to understand is how hard some of their technology is to actually set up and run fairly and find the right window. And it could take 6-9 months to actually program something in and make sure you've got a level playing field. So we do look at technologies all the time, and we rely heavily on our agency to do a filtering, and we actually have what we call a vendor process. And we actually put everybody through things, and we look at where they fit with us for what we're doing. So there is rigor in what we're doing and when we'll schedule for it. Otherwise, it's crazy town.
Is there anything that you're looking to take on? I mean, from what you've seen in that pipeline, do you think, right, that's a winner, we're going to do it, we know it'll take a while, but yes?
Is that a winner? Do you know, the industry moves so fast that something might only be a winner for a while. So some things come and go really quickly, and yes, we'll take them on, and then they're going to go, and we know they'll go. Things that we're looking at in the industry, I've lost the mic, I think, are actually about, in the future of media, the fragmentation into all of the social channels and as they grow, and how we spread and how we measure fairly across that is a real challenge, because they're not going to score high enough to necessarily resonate in econometrics, so we need fair benchmarks that we use for them, because they're nascent, they're not established. So, yeah.
Okay, and Thiago, you have a sort of a measurement stroke planning solution called RightReach, which sort of fits into it roughly uses attention, doesn't it, plus other things. I mean, can you just tell us about that quickly?
Yeah, so essentially it's exactly that challenge that we're wrestling with, right? For all of our clients, especially for large advertisers, you're probably already maxing out on all of your reach curves. You're really struggling to find where the headroom exists. So really it kind of takes attention. From a strategic perspective, right, it's kind of like you guys think of attention, it's the kind of opportunity for attention, because we agreed that the role of media is really just to find that, the rest is the creative's job. We look at persistence, which is essentially a proxy for the quality of the content it's showing up against, right? So I think a lot of the speakers have spoken about the fact that, you know, there is a difference to appearing in the middle of a drama on a Wednesday evening versus appearing between some TikToks. And then lastly, we look at the relevance, which is really our ability to place an ad in a relevant place for the consumer mindset. So, you know, if you are selling a mortgage and you can put that in a place programmatically where they are reading contents about how to think about applying for a mortgage, that's really useful. And we work with partners like Adelaide to be able to pull essentially third-party proxies that are updated, that we can use as a starting point for clients. And the way that we then validate that model is against whatever brand measures, or commercial measures, but generally clients like to start from a brand perspective, they tend to use. So whatever YouGov questions, for example, you might use as your measures of effectiveness for your brand advertising. And what we found is that in every single instance, and we've been running it for some of the early clients for almost 2 years now, the correlation between RightReach and those brand metrics that our advertisers actually care about is more than twice as much as traditional reach and frequency. So that's allowed us to not just find new headroom, but also rebalance, right, across that fragmented media landscape, so that you've actually got points that, you know, potentially are asymmetric to the data that your competition is seeing, and therefore present a really cheap opportunity for you to be able to get some quality reach that no one else has noticed, just because they're not applying the same kind of filters to the way they're thinking about it.
Yeah. Do you want to add something, Marc?
100% right. Like there is, I don't want to discount the need for rigor in any of this stuff, but there's, it's been proven. Like when you use attention metrics, you're gonna get better outcomes. There's so much opportunity in the market today to do arbitrage and to find bargains and optimize away from overpriced things. Like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough.
Okay, I'm going to open up to the floor in a moment. Just put your hand up if you've got a question straight away, and we'll take it right now. If not, we're going to talk about first and zero-party data very quickly first. So, okay, so what impact can first and zero-party data have on the relationship between the brand, the consumer, and the media company? I mean, does anyone have any strong views on that? Sort of, you know, I mean, we hear a lot about how important first-party data is becoming because of the sort of deprecation of cookies, etc. You know,
I have a lot of it.
You've got a lot. Good. Okay.
So we have a lot of first-party data. Okay, and the question that we ask ourselves is, and we ask it all the time, is, would the consumer expect us to do this? Would they understand why we've done it? For things, especially when you're running multi-brand. So there are things that you've, as marketeers, media agencies, you have got to keep challenging anything that has been set as a process, because lawyers are going to keep the company as safe as possible, which is their job, and they are advisors and inputs and guiders. They are not necessarily the deciders. And you need to make your case for how you want to use first-party data. Otherwise, it will stagnate, you know, and the customer won't benefit. So you've got to think about, do you use an audience for suppression, which is a really key thing. Don't show them an ad for something they can't have because they've already got it, right? And it's a media efficiency. Or are you using first-party data for business intelligence, so that you know something about that person when they reappear? This is in an authenticated mode as opposed to unauthenticated. So you can use your data in very clever ways, but in the future of media world, it becomes crucially important, because you need to use your first party, if you've got it, and your second, so the likes of the Amazons and the eBays and the Googles, etc. What you can apply as a brand working with them, so that you can then build a media plan from addressable, and you build upwards from addressable to do it that way around, okay? Because linear TV, bye. Sorry, but you know, so I'm digital by background. So you've got to balance it all out. Obviously, there's a huge role for linear, but even, you know, broadcast avoid, etc. Again, it's addressable. It's all about addressable first for us as a brand. Okay.
Okay. Last chance to dive in if you've got an audience question. We've got 3 minutes left. We've got time. Gentleman over there. Thank you. And if anyone else has one, just put your hand up and I'll get you next. And do you want to just tell us who you are, and if you want to address it to one person in particular, just say.
Yeah, okay. So Danny Holmes from Experian. Probably address it to Marc actually on this one, because I want to talk about attention and sustainability in ad tech, and how they're sort of talked about sort of interchangeably almost. When I say sustainability, I mean the carbon intensity of the ad ecosystem. So I was just curious to know, and it's probably to the wider group as well, like how much do you see this? I think it's only really a thing that's come to the surface in the last year or so, I would say. But how much is it shaping decisions right now for you? Where do you see that going in the next year? What needs to be done? Probably three quite big questions there, I guess.
All right, so I have a sort of unpopular opinion about the carbon stuff. TEED's released some really interesting research. Like, if you want to dramatically reduce the amount of carbon your campaigns emit, just don't use programmatic. Like, direct bot campaigns are literally 1% of the emissions that programmatic is. That's not a popular opinion, but that's the facts, right? That's just how it is. It's really hard otherwise to convince advertisers to take worse outcomes in exchange for lower emissions. So we're not an emissions measurement company, so we don't really do too much of that. But what we found with attention metrics is super interesting. When you optimize your campaigns using attention metrics instead of using viewability or other metrics, you end up running fewer, higher quality impressions. The number one predictor of emissions in a campaign is the number of impressions that you run. So right away, you're cutting off a whole bunch of impressions that did nothing, and except for generated emissions. The second thing is we find that higher quality sites that deliver more attentive experiences generally have less like ad tech gunk in them, and so they're less emissive. So you can, if you don't want to, sort of shelve programmatic, which I think is a pretty dramatic response, and I'd understand it, you could use attention metrics, know that you're going to drive better outcomes using attention metrics, and that you're going to drive lower emissions as well. I don't know if that answered what needs to be done next, but I mean, I'm up here selling attention metrics, so.
Okay. 30 seconds for someone else if they want to add anything to that. No? Okay. All right, well, I think we're out of time, really, so thank you very much for everybody, and thank you very much to the panellists, of course. It was great. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you.